Well, hey, y'all. You made it. We're at the last session of the night, right? Or afternoon. Thank you for coming and choosing to come to my session on Node.js. I'm excited to be here. But before we get into the talk, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to try to put some things in perspective. I think a healthy perspective may be the most valuable thing you can take away from this talk. People can get pretty bent out of shape when you challenge their choice of language or platform. Well, I am just one of many speakers here, and we're just normal folk, you know. I'm here to share my knowledge and experience and opinions in good faith, based on where I'm coming from, my circumstances, and my interests and my journey. The truth is, we all have limited experiences, and we're all trying to navigate our tech journeys the best way we know how. And it wasn't that long ago, if you remember, that there were some very sincere folk in the tech industry who were really gung-ho about pushing a technology called Silverlight. Anybody remember that? So technology comes and goes. And we never know if, what we're so excited about today may be even, still around in the next few years or however long. But the older I get, the more I recognize there's so much that we don't know, and we can't predict where we'll be in 5 years or even 1 year from now. We're all doing the best that we can with the things that we have today. So take everything with a grain of salt. Give me and the other speakers you may have gone to today some grace and benefit of the doubt. I'm happy to share with you the tools and technologies that I've been geeking out about over the last few years. I hope this talk is fun and interesting and is encouraging to you to want to dive in and take a look at this silly JavaScript technology. So the real learning and joy comes from living out your journey. Now, I believe that our purpose in life can be kind of summed up in, you may have heard this as the Boy Scout rule or something. And so I want to encourage you to this is not just about our ecosystem, our planet, but also we have opportunities each and every day to whatever situation that we find ourselves in, whether it's an interaction with a colleague in the workplace or with a family member or friends outside of work, we have opportunities to leave each of those encounters better than we find them. So make a positive impact on the world in any way that you can. So learning something like Node.js may play a part in that. Who knows? But find an environment where you can thrive and you can give back. Choose whatever technology makes you happy. Take care of yourself. If the net effect of where you are is not promoting and pushing you to learn and do exciting things and give you energy, find something that does and go after it. Don't let anyone dictate to you what technology you should or shouldn't be using, certainly not me. Choose what aligns with you. Now, personally, I choose to use Node.js because JavaScript is everywhere. JavaScript is ubiquitous. It can be part of our back-end APIs, our front-end web apps. There's mobile apps, and so much more. Desktop apps, command line tools, Internet of Things. I think that's amazing. And that is a testament to, even though JavaScript has some dubious beginnings and has caused its share of pain on a lot of developers, especially in the early days of the internet, I think it's incredible what it's evolved to today and what it enables us to do. But like the line in Jurassic Park, JavaScript developers are so preoccupied with whether or not they can that they didn't stop to think if they should. right? So JavaScript is everywhere. It may not need to be everywhere, but it's pretty cool. So, what are we learning about? We're learning about why you might consider Node.js, what it is. I'm going to talk about some of the tools and frameworks, and hopefully just give you a good intro and overall view of why you might want to consider it. So, my journey with Node.js began in 2014. I had previously been Microsoft all the things, ASP.NET, MVC, C#, SQL Server. At that time, doing a lot of in Hibernate. I was building web applications, so I was using JavaScript and jQuery and starting to get into React. I was working for a startup company where we were pushing the boundaries of what we could accomplish building a distributed, scalable system in .NET in those days. And we ran into quite a bit of frustration as we were scaling our application and services. And we began to question, is this Microsoft stuff really, is it helping us or is it hindering us? Are there other technologies that we can explore to help our environment? And so we decided to run some experiments with Node.js, building some microservices, and we were using other technologies like RabbitMQ and Redis. Could we have done those things with .NET? Yeah, probably. And you could be much more successful today than 10 years ago, because back in those 10 years ago the drivers and packages that were available for those non-Microsoft technologies were either half-baked or didn't exist. And JavaScript, however, since we were building a web SaaS product, it made sense that we improve our JavaScript skills and collaboration up and down our stack. What we discovered is that Node.js allowed us to not only focus on JavaScript, but it allowed us to attract talent from all kinds of backgrounds, which brought in more diverse experiences, more polyglot ideas from other frameworks and platforms. Node.js allowed us to be cross-platform when back then .NET was not really a viable option for cross-platform. There was just less friction overall, and we can't discount the joy and excitement of learning new things, right? That's why I continue to be in technology, is I love to learn. And so whatever's bright and shiny, we run after it, right? Because there's a lot of joy and excitement of discovering something new. I do love Node quite a bit. Let's see, Oklahoma maybe is what I was thinking of when I was thinking of this, making a parody song. People will say we're in love. Okay, why Node.js? Sing it. I'm not going to sing it. So there's been lots of articles and posts and opinions published over the years on Node.js. This was from a post called "Why Node.js is Becoming the Go-To Technology in the Enterprise." And these are the same things that we found at my startup: rapid innovation delivery, developer happiness. Everything was thumbs up. We were having a great time. We also found that our experience got better and better as we learned more and used it more and built out our kind of frameworks of applications and services. To me, Node.js exemplifies KISS. No, not that kind of KISS. KISS as in keep it super simple. I like that alternative to the KISS acronym. Start with the simplest solution that works and do one thing and do it really well. I think Node.js kind of exemplifies that, because Node.js is, basically a tool for executing JavaScript, and is very, very lightweight. Use cases for Node could be back-end APIs and mobile apps, serverless computing, real-time streaming. It's really tailored for I/O and concurrency. So basically, the internet. So use case, the internet. But it's more than just a back end. As I mentioned earlier, you can do so much more with Node.js. You can create automation scripts. You can build CLI tools. You can make those portable with something like NEXE, where you can file those to executables. Microservices, Internet of Things, desktop apps. And speaking of desktop apps, I've built quite a few desktop apps in the last 10 years using a framework called Electron, which is Node.js and Chromium. So, show of hands, Visual Studio Code, use it, everything. That, you're using Node.js, y'all. That is Electron. When Microsoft came out with Node.js, with Visual Studio Code, I heard it was, my thought was, it runs on Windows and Mac and Linux, and I thought, man, how did they pull that off? Because my assumption was Xamarin, and I had tried to build some cross-platform desktop apps with Xamarin, and I thought, man, they must know something that I don't know, because that was a less than optimal experience, we shall say. And so I was very shocked to discover Visual Studio Code was built on Electron. And there's a number of other apps that have been built with Electron too. There's lots of really awesome case studies on Node.js. Walmart was one of the first and famous ones for adopting Node for their mobile backend, and they're famous for deploying a brand new back-end system for all their mobile platform on Black Friday. Can you think of a better time to deploy something brand new for a commercial product than Black Friday when you're a retail company? Okay, so microservices, a lot of, what typically happens at companies like these, when you look at their use cases, that they will take existing parts of their infrastructure and convert that over to Node, and just as, kind of like creating a spike or an experiment and discovering, yeah, this really does work, and it really works better than what we had before, and, it just kind of goes viral from there. So increases in productivity, increases in requests per second, and all the kinds of measures that you can imagine. Node.js has gotten very popular in DevOps because of its being cross-platform and event-driven and very small footprint, and it works really well. So, Node.js in a nutshell. It was first introduced in 2009. It is JavaScript on the server, whereas in the past, JavaScript has been predominantly in the browser. It is built upon Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine, which is really cool because the team at Chrome, they are continuously finding new and better ways to increase the performance of JavaScript compilation and execution. So Node can take full advantage of all the advancements and improvements that they're making. Another interesting thing about the fact that their Node is built on Chrome V8 is that if you follow JavaScript, new language features come out every year. And it goes through this process of stages. Stage 3 is like the experimental stage, where the Chrome and other JavaScript engines will add those new proposed features into the V8 engine. And Node is, if you care about those new features that are coming out, that's being proposed, Node is the easiest, or one of the easiest ways you can experiment with those features, because the Node team will add those as well and put them behind like feature flags, like command line flags that you can turn on and off. So it's really cool. Node, because it is JavaScript and on the V8 engine, it is built upon a asynchronous event loop. So you can, from a mental model as a developer, you don't have to think about in terms of like multi-threadedness. You just work in the asynchronous model of using like async and await or promises or any of those kind of mechanisms that are provided for asynchronous communication. And under the hood, Node can take advantage of cores and do a bunch of other things, but the programming model is pretty easy to reason about. And then there's the community. The community for Node.js is in a lot of languages and platforms can also make this argument too, but it's pretty phenomenal, how much there is available for Node.js developers. Another thing that I love about Node.js and building applications on Node is that I can use the latest and greatest language features of JavaScript without having to even think about transpiling, using something like Babel or Webpack. I mean, you can use those things together with whatever you're building, but if you're just building straight back-end APIs or Node.js command line apps or whatever, you don't have to have a build step or transpilation. You can use the JavaScript isn't as bad as it used to be. It's getting better, maybe. You can use the latest and greatest. That's the point. NPM is, I don't know that it actually stands for Node Package Manager, but that's what everybody calls it. It is the way that we pull in dependencies into our Node applications. And you may have used NPM even if you're not using Node today, because NPM has become a kind of a standard way of installing software and packages for front end and other things. So NPM is the largest ecosystem of open source libraries in the world. There's over 2 million modules last time I checked. It's crossed more than 1 billion downloads per day since September of 23, I think. That's good and bad, right? NPM is vast. If there's anything that you can think of that you could need some help with, you can probably find a module for it in NPM or 7 or 10. And then you got the problem of like, well, how do I figure out which one of these is the right one that I need, or what's the healthiest one to use? And so then you have to go, do some more research. Now, this slide may not be super interesting to you, but what it boils down to is that Node.js is on a yearly release schedule, and every release goes through 1 year of active support and 18 months of maintenance. So if your production apps, they need to be targeting some LTS version of Node, which LTS stands for long-term support, which is both stable and receives security and bug fixes. The odd number versions like Node.js 21 are released every October, and they have a 6-month cycle of like a beta period before getting promoted to the next even release, which means that version 22 just came out a few weeks ago and will be in support for a long, long time ahead. I think it's like April of 27 before version 22 will be considered out of support. So version 22, it got the new latest and greatest V8 engine. It got which included another supplemental compiler for JavaScript called maglev, and which really helps improve performance improvement for scripts and CLI apps. So if you're using Node to automate some things or to run scripts or to create command line applications, it's good news. It was already fast to begin with. Now it's even better. There's a native watch mode. Watch mode is like you launch your application and it watches your project folder to see if there's any changes to files. And as you update a JavaScript file or some other file in your project, it will automatically restart your process, and so that you can keep on working without having to stop and restart. So there's been modules in the community for a long time, and I'll talk about one of those. But now there's a native alternative. There's also a native WebSocket client, and Node got a new mascot, the Rocket Turtle. Now, I don't know if turtle really conveys what the Node.js community. So what I understand is that this is a throwback to, there were a lot of digs at Node in the early days where people would post comments on the GitHub repo with turtle, because JavaScript is slow. And then it became like, adding the turtle and putting a bunch of rockets and things like that with it. So it's a kind of a throwback. All right, why did the spider get glasses? She wanted to improve her website. Just a little in-flight entertainment. Installing Node.js, you can go to nodejs.org and click the big green button for downloading the latest LTS version. However, even though that's easy to do, I would highly recommend that if you're on Mac or Linux, that you install NVM, which is the Node Version Manager. And if you're on Windows, if you don't already have the Windows subsystem for Linux, I highly recommend you install that and use that as your starting point for working with Node.js. Then you can use the same tools that are available for Mac and Linux on your Windows development machine. So NVM install 20 would install version 20. You can also install other versions of Node and have them side by side. You can switch to them easily using the command called NVM use. And just makes it super easy to work with multiple versions of Node and to keep those versions of Node updated. If you don't want to use the Windows subsystem for Linux, you can also, there is a NVM version just for Windows, and will also give you the same experience. So when you install Node.js, what you get are two command line executables, Node and npm. Wow. Isn't that amazing? So Node is used for executing code and includes your bare minimum core of library of things like working with a file system, HTTP libraries, data streams, your environment, your handling, debugging, just a core set of utilities. npm is used to install your dependencies, and it can also be used to run scripts, such as your tests or your builds. So when you first create a Node.js project, you're going to most likely open up your terminal or command prompt. You're going to create a folder somewhere on your computer. You're going to change to that folder and run npm init, which is going to create a package JSON file. It's going to step you through a few questions like the name of your package, and it'll default to the name of the folder that you're in, a version, description, and so forth. And this package JSON file is important because it contains all the metadata and dependencies for your project. To install dependencies, then after you run npm init, you can run something like npm install, and then the name of the package that you want to install. So Axios is one of several HTTP clients that you can install to make like REST API calls to other services from your Node app. If it's a developer dependency like ESLint, which is something I install first thing every time I create a new Node project, because it's going to check your JavaScript code to make sure you're doing all the right things. Then you use either the $D or the save dev to save it as a developer dependency, because you don't want to deploy any of those things into production. Oh, and that's the -D version. So I have my own package called ESLint config reverent geek that has all like my personal preferences of how I like my JavaScript in my Node.js apps. All right, now we're going to look at some examples of typical JavaScript that you're going to see when you're working with Node.js applications. And these take on, we'll talk about a few flavors that you'll see out in the wild too. But to get started, the require is how you commonly pull in your dependencies. So in this case, FS is the built-in file system module for Node.js. If you've installed something through NPM, like Express, you use the same exact syntax. It's going to check to see if it's a native Node module, and if it doesn't find it there, it's going to search in your Node modules folder that you've run or installed and see if it's there. Now, when you build your own modules locally in your project, then you'll reference those using a relative path syntax like /app/apps API service. And you notice that API service does not have a .js extension. It is assumed that any JavaScript file that is a module in your project you can reference without having to specify .js. Some of that is changing, but that's a convenience thing, the way Node was created. And then a lot of times you'll see some modules require you to like execute a function or call, create a new instance of it if it's a JavaScript class or something like that, and maybe pass in some arguments. So talking about flavors of JavaScript that you're going to see in typical Node.js sample applications and tutorials and things that are out there, the original Node.js pattern for doing asynchronous development was callbacks. Anybody done callbacks? Yeah, several of you have. So a callback is one where you call a function, you pass in whatever arguments that may be required by that function, and then the final argument of is your callback function, and it can live in line with as this one is, or it can be just the name of the function that lives somewhere else in that file or that you reference. So the typical callback function will have the first argument of the callback is an error object that you can check to see if there was any problems, and then whatever the results are being passed back from into your callback function. Then we got promises, which is, a little bit better approach to dealing with than callbacks. And so for a promise, we make a call to a function that is a promise-based function. We pass in whatever arguments we need for it, and then we can start chaining together .thens, and .thens can chain to another .then, and we can have a .catch at the end of it all. Nowadays, we have async and await, which is even better. And it supports promises. It's kind of syntactic sugar on top of promises, but it's so much easier to reason about. We can await for the results from a promise-based function or async function. We can then go to the next line and use those results. And then we can use try-catch around all that code, and it works like we would expect it to. To give you an example of creating a module in Node.js, I've got a couple of functions, convert to Celsius, convert to Fahrenheit. Now I've got an object called temp that has some properties, has some properties on it, like the the Celsius and Fahrenheit values, and also the two functions that I declared above. And the magic is module.export. So you'll see this in a lot of Node.js code that is still out there today. This is how you expose to the rest of the Node.js project or to the world. This is what I'm exposing. This is the interface, if you will, the properties and functions and objects that are going to be published outside of this file. And then to use the file, I'll first require it in using that relative path syntax, and now I can access the properties that were exposed. I can access the functions and use that to convert Fahrenheit to Celsius. Okay. Now, Node.js natively supports ES modules. So if you're a front-end developer and you're used to using that import-export syntax and, using something like Babel or Webpack or some other transpiler to take your ES module code and turn it into something that's more compatible across all the browsers, you can now use ES module syntax in Node.js and not have to do any transpilation. So if you're on board and gung-ho about using ES modules, you're gonna be happy with Node.js, because now you can do that natively more and more examples and more projects are going the route of using ES modules as part of their code. So instead of using the require, you use the import statement. One of the things that's changing about Node.js that they're kind of correcting as they go is namespacing the built-in Node modules. So the convention is preface Node : then the native module that exists in the Node framework. So fs/promises is the promise-based interface for the file system. Then we can export an async function called readFile.json, pass in a file name, and read that file and return the JSON data. And then to use this module that's in our application, we'll use the import readFile.json function. And you'll notice that I'm specifying the extension of the file. So there's a couple of different ways Node supports ES modules. One way is you specify in the package JSON that this whole project is based on ES modules, and so treat every JS file as if it were an ES module. Or if you're kind of mixing and matching ES modules and the previous, what's referred to as common JS modules, you can use extensions. MJS is for ES modules, CJS is for common JS. But the key is, if you're using ES modules, you do have to specify the extension. So now I can read in my file and parse that JavaScript and do whatever I need to do with it. Okay. So I get asked, a lot. Well, how do you do things like, read from a database? Use something like SQL Server or Postgres or any of the number relational databases. Because as you're building a back-end system, typically you're going to be talking to APIs or others, making other API calls. So this is just one example. There's tons of support out there for different. There's even like 4 or 5 different modules available for SQL Server that have like different approaches and patterns to work with SQL, and they're all good. I mean, there's a reason why they exist, because they all do something that's kind of cool, different. So the official MS SQL one will require that in. We'll typically in a Node.js application, you use environment variables for things like connection strings and any kind of secrets. And when you deploy your applications in production, you're going to set those environment variables as part of your containers or servers that you're building on the other side. So we don't want to hard code any of that stuff in the application. So we're pulling that from the environment, and we got an async function. We got to get our connect to the database, use the connection pool to then define a query. It takes in an input parameter as an email. We're going to query. We're using at email as a parameterized query, and pass in that value in that line, right? And then return the result. And again, we can use try catch and do all that stuff. And then the magic sauce is to use module.exports, or if we're building an ES module, we would use export in the name of the function. Okay, let's look at a demo. I've got my project open here. I'm going to run npm start, npm run dev. And it's going to run my dev script, do all my stuff, and fire up the web server, and then I'll open up the application. Now, oh yeah, so I guess I need to, I'm telling you a bunch of stuff and you're not seeing it. Sorry. So here's my application. You've heard of the Ipsum generators, right? You know, where you need to build like a bunch of filler text to like build a design. And so I decided I kind of like bacon. So I built a bacon Ipsum generator. And I can say, you know, how many pounds of bacon do I want? I can say 5, make the bacon. It's going to make an API call back to my Node service and give me all my text that I need to fill out my prototype and send it on to, you know, the C-suite executives that are really interested in seeing this. So down here I can copy to the clipboard and now paste that into my app. I think this is probably the most valuable application I've built in my career. But as I said earlier, I've got my application running in the background. I just stopped it. I'm going to clear that and make this bigger so you can see it a little better. But I ran npm run dev, which launches my dev script and launches the application. So what this looks like under the covers is, first let me open up the package.json file so you can see what a package.json file looks like. It's I've got a name, version, and again, let me make this bigger. Empathy for the audience. That's what I'm all about. All right. Name, version, description. I've got a main that tells me what file to launch when the application starts, which is in the source folder. I've got some scripts, including like a build script for Tailwind. I'm using Tailwind CSS for this project. And I'm in dev, I'm using a module called NodeMon. You know, I told you earlier that Node.js now has a built-in watch function. That's what Node is. NodeMon's been around for many, many years. It's been the kind of the standard, and there's still a lot that it does that the native version doesn't do yet. So I'm still more comfortable using NodeMon. You can tell it what folders to watch, like the source folder and the public folder, what extensions to watch for, and then when something changes, it's going to re-execute my build and start scripts. So I've got start and I've got a test script. And then as I scroll down here, there's developer dependencies like ESLint that I showed before, and NodeMon. Tailwind is a developer dependency. And then my production dependencies are, I'm using Fastify, which is one of the more modern, popular web server frameworks for Node.js. and a few other things. So I'm using Vue as well. So that's what a package.json looks like. On the server itself, I'm requiring in Fastify. I have a routes module that defines the routes and API endpoints for my application. I'm using .env to manage my environment variables. That allows me to use like a .env file to have like my server port and server name, connection strings, any kind of secrets. That's something you don't check in with your source code if you're checking the stuff into Git or whatever your repository is. So make sure you ignore that. But Node now also has a native way of reading environment variables, but .env is still kind of like the old school standard way of doing it and what I still prefer. So I'm creating an instance of the Fastify server, and I've got a start function that kind of registers my plugins for the server and launches server using the port and the host. So it's pretty, and then finally at the end I'm launching the server. So this is kind of typical to a lot of the startup code that you'll see for web applications. You know, it's going to look different depending on if you're using Express or some other framework, but there's a lot of similarities. So I don't think there's any reason to dive into the other stuff. But yeah, give me 21 pounds of bacon. I can do that. Sweet. Back to reality. What does a computer like to snack on? Well, you would think if it computer, it might, but no, it's computer chips. I'm not hearing enough groans. Developer tools. So some of the most popular ones that, and some of these I've already talked about. There's ESLint, which will check the syntax of your JavaScript files, give you formatting rules, kinds of cool stuff. So if you're not already using something like ESLint for JavaScript, I highly recommend it. NodeMon is, as I've shown you, I guess I could have showed, I won't go back and do that. But if you make a change to a file like a HTML or JavaScript or CSS file or something like that, it's going to automatically restart your service so that you can keep on eating on your application and building and not interrupt your workflow. For test frameworks, Node now has a native Node test framework called Node Test, but there's still some more fully featured ones out there. If you may be familiar with Jest, Mocha has been like the OG for Node.js for a long, long time, and so still gets a lot of love from developers. And then you got frameworks like Test Double and Sign On for doing stubs and mocks. Recommended tools, I also talked about .env as a way of loading environment variables from an env file. The built-in file system module has basically everything you need to read and write files, but there are a couple of packages out there that take it a step further and give you a lot of shortcuts and kind of nice to have features. So FS Extra adds some of those convenient extensions, such as reading and writing JSON files, which is something you might have to do, and I do that a lot. If you need to access APIs outside of your Node.js app, use something like, there's a built-in fetch, I think, now, but you can use Axios or Got, and there's several others. Socket.io for real-time stuff. Commander, there's one called Yards. Commander, they're both really good, but that gives you parsing capabilities for building command line applications. So over the years, I've probably built more command line applications for Node than I have built web servers or microservices or something like that. I just find, Node is a really easy tool to reach for when I'm wanting to automate some things in across applications. And if I want to share that with other developers on my team, I can create a command line application and say, hey, you can run this to do that thing. NEXE will take a command line application and compile it so that it's a standalone executable so you can share it with even more people. So there are lots and lots of frameworks that are available for Node. Express is arguably still the most popular way of building web applications. But it is the oldest and probably, crustiest out there. It's kind of unfortunate that there's still such a huge number of developers who use it and it's so universal that when you go and find examples of how to do something in Node, the example that you find is almost always with Express. So even though Express wouldn't be my first choice today, it's still a good technology to learn because there were a lot of patterns established in Express, especially like the way they do middleware, building plugins or application components. The middleware pattern that Express created is you see that in a lot of places. So it's good to know Express. Fastify is one of several newer frameworks that's used by big companies like Capital One and Walmart and American Express. There are many, many others. Nest is, and Next and Nuxt and all these I don't know, it's confusing. And then I've talked about Electron as a way to build desktop applications. So integration strategies. Like I described earlier with companies like Walmart and PayPal and Fandango, they would use things like what we would consider the strangulation pattern. It's a terrible name. But it is the idea that you take some piece of your architecture and you create a proxy for that. It's like a proxy layer. So every request that comes in, it gets routed to either the new Node.js implementation or the legacy implementation of whatever that service is. So if you're trying to replace a Java application with Node or a .NET application with Node, as you're building out the new version in Node, you move more and more of those requests get forwarded to Node. And over time, you're able to eliminate the proxy altogether, and all the application traffic is going to your Node client. So you can build your proxy with Node.js and use HTTP clients to make calls to your legacy systems or whatever mechanism you have for doing that. Nginx is another way of kind of like creating a proxy type system where Nginx handles the routing of going from one type of service or another. Is also a proxy approach. Messaging, which has a lot of benefits in and of itself as a way to scale your applications, but there are lots of messaging clients that are out there that you can plug into Node.js. So if you're using something like RabbitMQ or Azure, and be able to implement different services and whatever technology makes sense for that service. And Node.js could be one of several that's listening for messages on a queue and doing the work that comes in. Last but not least, I believe, as I mentioned before, that we all have a purpose in life. And I want to encourage you that you can make a positive impact in your workplace, in your community. I encourage you to give back. And I'm here today because someone years ago, one, introduced me to technology in the first place, and two, I had some folks who encouraged me to get involved in the developer community, which turned into me getting up the courage to give my first talk at a user group years and years ago, which led to me becoming a speaker, speaking at events like this, literally all around the world. And it doesn't have to be public speaking. I know that's a terrifying thing. I've got a whole talk on, on public speaking called Public Speaking Without Barfing on Your Shoes. And that is a thing. But there are lots of ways that you can give back to your community through the open source project that you create, the blog posts that you create, the tutorials. Share what you are learning. Share your experiences. Share especially your mistakes, because that's how you learn. You make mistakes, you're like, well, I'm not going to do that again. Here's what I learned from making those mistakes. And so then you can share that as a key takeaway to someone else. So run some experiments, have some fun. I hope I showed you enough to at least pique your interest and get started with Node.js if that's something you're interested in doing. Do like PayPal or Walmart and run some experiments, see what works and what doesn't work. And with that, thank you so much again for coming to my talk. You are free to go. And if you have any questions, you want to talk to me, feel free to come up. I'm not that scary, really. And let's geek out about Node.js.